Welcome to the viewing room. I have Jennifer Buwani, Mark Pellegrino, and Jax Schumann to talk about the new Amazon Prime show, Fallout. And we're going to be talking about the premise, the characters, the plot, and capitalism and business, maybe a little bit. So before we get into all of that, I want to get everyone's thumbs up, thumbs down on the show. So we'll start with Jennifer Buwani.
Me?
Well,
Okay.
you're next to me,
Um,
so
all
on my screen.
right. I'm going to give it a kind of slightly thumbs down. And
Okay.
I would say just top level because there was only a couple of characters I cared about, and I really didn't like the theme of it.
Hmm.
But I thought the production design was top notch.
Yeah. All right. So quarter of a way thumbs down, I'm gonna say that looked like.
Yes.
All right. So Jax, what do you think?
I am going to say that I thought that it was. I'll give a thumbs up and a thumbs down because thumbs up for the
Okay.
thumbs up for just agreeing with Jennifer for the production design,
Yeah.
as well as I was entertained. I was very entertained. There wasn't any. There were some moments where I was like, especially when we start talking about themes, where I did want to shoot myself in the head. But for the most part, I was entertained. I really enjoyed a lot of the actors' performances. I mentioned this when we were talking about our pre-show talk that to me this was like, well, actually, I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold off on that until we start talking about themes. So that's my review. Like good on the surface, like all of the entertainment and all of the writing elements. I thought I do have some complaints about the writing, and I was entertained, but messaging was shite, if I'm allowed to say that.
Shite. All right. Mark, do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I almost don't consider messaging anymore in my evaluation of the movie because
Yes.
I pretty much feel that corporation evil is going to be responsible for every bad thing that happens to the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And so that's just the easiest thing for writers to go to right now. It takes so much more creativity to make the corporate guys actually the decent people, as opposed to the villains. Because they would have to reevaluate their whole ethical system. So I don't even consider that a problem anymore. So that may mean something is wrong with me. Look, I started out with a hard thumbs down. I couldn't take the acting, with the exception of Walter Goggins, who's a very good actor. And it was difficult for me to take the acting through a lot of it, although the characters did begin to grow on me because of the principles of the Walter main character. I liked her idealism, and so that, as artificial as it was in many cases and as out of step as it was part of her fish out of waterness that made me sort of come to like her. The aesthetic was great because it was a combination of genres for me. I loved the way they combined 50s, 60s McCarthyistic genre, the Red Scare genre, with a Western and
Yeah.
with medieval times. It was a great sort of combination of genres, and well done as far as the technical aspects of the achievement of those combination of genres. So overall, despite my initial skepticism and my dislike for some, I'm going to have a different premise than you guys. So I don't necessarily dislike the premise. Of course, I hate their view of capitalism, but I don't think it's capitalism. And I'm going to make a case for why I think it's sort of reflective of stuff that's going on today. So I am going to give a reluctant thumbs up, in part because one of my students is in it.
Oh
Go.
wow.
Oh, which one?
He's
You want to?
Reg McPhee. He was a guy who was running for office, who eventually goes into the booth, and he could vote for himself. And he's like,
Oh,
"I want
really? That
Aw.
guy? Oh, he was a student?
neck brace." He was such a good actor, and he was always one of the better actors in my class, mine and Tracy's class. And he moved to New York ages ago and started a sort of a commercial career. And I'd always wondered what happened to him. To see him on a show,
Aw.
it's now getting a second season. I'm very proud of him and happy about that. As long as it doesn't screw me out of my Prime show's third season. All right, that's all.
Okay, we'll talk about that. All right, we'll talk about
Wow.
actors support and beef at the end. I'm interested in that. That's awesome. I'm gonna give it my first. So I've seen it twice now already. So I'm gonna give it my first time. I said one thumbs up, and the second time another thumbs up. I liked it even more. And
Wow.
I'll say a couple of reasons why I liked it more, for a lot of reasons as we go. But I wanted to start our discussion with the background and the premise of the show, which, so one, this is a video game show, right? So this is an interesting genre that has a mixed past in cinema and TV, in the sense of most of them have been flops. A lot of them have not done well. People lambast them. The Last of Us, you guys I know did a review of, review of that one, and I don't remember what was all of your review of that.
That's a
We loved it.
superior-
We loved it, yeah.
The Last of Us is a superior show, but it's also an unusually superior video game.
That's true. That's true. Well, this is one of the more popular games also. It's a big franchise that's also popular.
I've played a little of it. ages
Okay.
ago.
Yeah, so I've played it a bit too, but I've never actually completed it. I played Fallout 4. So it's so big and long that I just didn't couldn't go through the whole thing, I guess. I'm trying it again now.
I barely got out of training. I played the very first one and I was eaten by rats before I could even get out of the first level. And then I played
God, I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, and then I played the New Vegas one, and I got killed on a train track, which I did appreciate. They had a lot of that imagery and
the train track, yeah.
Yeah,
so
TV.
I mean I think the game is actually fun, but it's just a lot of time you have to put into it. I think that's the only issue. But the interesting thing to me was this background. And Mark, you kind of alluded to it, but the thing, and just focusing on the show, but the game does the same thing. It's basically like a dystopian, utopian sci-fi Western, right? It has four genres intermingled into this really unique way. And that's one of the reasons I give it 2 thumbs up for the most part, is that it's just so interesting and intriguing and different and new that I was really enjoying it. I mean, there's definitely things I disagree in how it's done, but I'm just curious, do you guys, so I know, Mark, Jennifer, you just said you played the game a bit. Jax, did you play it at all? You said no?
Nope.
Okay.
Never played it.
So I'm curious, what do you guys understand about the world they're living in? That just from the show and what you know, have you looked anything up? Do you understand the world that this show comes into or is in? Like the timeline? Do you understand the background, the dropping of the
I
bombs?
mean, I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding the 260 years time span between the first nuclear drop and then the drama that happens in California. Some of that stuff is a little unclear to me. But I think I get a basic gist of because there's a few long expositional scenes when the main character and the brother are discovering their past lineage that uncovers the whole conspiracy, so to speak, which
Yes.
in effect is, yes.
Yeah,
I
so
didn't have
go ahead,
trouble.
Jen.
I didn't feel like I was confused about the timeline and what happened. I mean, in the beginning, right? Because I never played Fallout, but in the beginning, I was like, what the hell is this? What happened? But it was,
Yeah.
I actually appreciate that as a writer, because I don't want to be
Yeah.
told everything immediately. I want to try and
Try to
guess it
work
on
on it.
my own. And I get annoyed as a writer or as a viewer when they don't do that, or when they do it too late, like so late, like beyond the point that I care anymore. But I feel like they did it at sort of just the right time. They brought in enough of the details and they did a really good job, I thought, with Walton Goggins' character as kind of being the touchstone for every timeline.
Mhm.
So that was my take on it.
So you do understand it takes place in 27/7 is when it starts, right? That's when the bombs are dropped. So it's a futuristic world. And do you understand
2277, right?
No. So Walton,
Or
the bombs
27/7.
initially drop in 2077.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know what I
You're
said.
right.
I thought I said that, but so yeah, 2077. And there's been a resource war all over the world. There's been World War III essentially for 10 years or 20 years or something like that before that. like during that whole time.
So they're hearkening back to the Iraq war, which everybody says was for oil, and they say that, you know, corporations are sort of funding some of these. I mean, this is where I think it's attempting to reflect actual
Yeah.
real life conspiracy theories about why we fought in Iraq, why we want to fuck with Iran, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Except it is a world war. So it's not just Iraq. It really is in the show and in the game, it's drawn as a world war. I think at one point there's even a slight reference to the fact that that America annexes Canada and calls it Little USA. And there's like wars between China, Russia, and America, essentially.
Well, they go to, didn't the, I mean, you find out in the end that it was the corporations that basically started the nuclear war, but it wasn't Russia
the nuclear
that,
part.
the nuclear part. It wasn't Russia though, it was China, wasn't it? That,
well, they're
China,
all at war is what I'm saying. But yeah, so like,
but they were all at nuclear war? Because I thought that the corporations goaded China into sending bombs, and then that just started bombs everywhere.
no, my understanding is the corporations dropped the bombs. The initial
Well,
bombs.
they actually dropped the bombs because, okay.
Yeah, they're the ones who actually ignited the bombs that started everything.
But they told the story that it was China.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. But yeah, the lead up is that America or the Western allies or whatever have outsourced protection to these companies, right? To all these large corporations, and they're getting bigger and bigger. And essentially, they're becoming not companies, businesses. They're becoming
Governments, right?
governments. Essentially, they're just like fascist governments at this point, with just different names under this one unique thing. And Mark, I didn't know if you had anything to. I know you kind of had mentioned something about your unique view. So, like, why don't we talk about that boardroom scene in episode 7, where we learn a little bit about. I think it's episode 7, or maybe it's 8, where we learn like what the idea is behind the vaults in the future and what they're trying to accomplish. And is this what business people do?
Well, see, first of all, I thought thematically the idea that was stated over and over again is something to the effect of God save us from the people who want to save the world. You know, the philosopher kings that these people think they are, the scientists are the progressives of the late 19th and early 20th century that thought, you know, all we needed was a bunch of technocrats to run things. And this is sort of what's happening today. We're re-experiencing the progressive era with technocrats as opposed to some of the early scientists and their hokey ideas. And there is the belief amongst the elites that this is indeed would create a far better world. And so I love the rebellious theme of God save us from the people who want to save the world. And do I believe, given the now known facts of the World Economic Forum, that these cartelized businesses and billionaires get together and more or less make plans that they think the rest of us should follow along with? Yes, I do. I do think outsourcing, they're not outsourcing protection, but they are colluding with the government in such a way that they become the big players in government. Government basically, they own one another, and they collude with one another to keep each other in power. So it's not the typical corporations corrupt everything. It's the government corrupting. It's the government conflation and consorting with the businesses that make them into political entities that are capable of doing far more than they should be able to do, including, you know, worrying about the market for the vault, and in order to keep their shareholders satisfied, potentially doing something traumatic or awful in order to, you know, make their company stock rise, so to speak.
Yeah.
Do I think stuff like that happens? Oh yeah, on such an extreme and suicidal scale? No, of course not. But I mean, given enough power and losing that power from rationality and rights, you know, lots of things are possible. So I do think it's reflective of a certain kind of situation that exists out there today that people call crony capitalism, that I actually call fascism, that is that's real. Just don't confuse it with with capitalism.
Yeah. So, any other, Jennifer, Jax, did you have any thoughts on,
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same vein as that. I'm probably a little more turned off by it because I felt like it was a dig at American corporations. And I feel like this is something that comes out of Europe more, like the Davos group. This is not something that the American corporations, I think, would do. It like the suicidal aspect of it and just viciously, like, where does that come from? That's who is a model for that? It honestly made me mad when I saw that because it's so anti-American. And I just couldn't get past it.
But here's what I think, and I agree with you, but I think America has been Europeanized for over 150 years. So we are losing what made us uniquely American and have been losing it for a long time. And the people that go to Davos, I mean, they're not just European corporations, they're American corporations too that are colluding with these guys. The ones who say you're not gonna have property and you're gonna love it. You're gonna eat bugs. I mean, there's a lot of technocrats in the United States that believe the same thing.
But it's the American Constitution that's going to keep us
Good
from
luck with
allowing
that.
that to happen.
That's been gone for a while, but good luck. I hope you're right. But
I
if
know.
that were the case, then we wouldn't
But they
have.
didn't make the connection in the show that we threw out the Constitution and
well,
they
they
just
did
made a
not do
leap
that.
and
Yeah, they
just
definitely
blamed
did.
America for it. And I
They,
just
they
don't, I'm
yeah,
not
see,
buying that.
that's where they missed the collusion and they missed the government contaminating, making, enabling the corporations to have the power of force. And they missed that thing called the Constitution that should prevent that kind of stuff, but somehow is
Yes.
absent in these worlds.
Well, this is a
You
world
know,
where the
what I
Constitution.
would have, I guess
Yes.
what I would have liked to have seen, kind of more to Jennifer's point, but also understanding what Mark is saying, I would have liked to have seen examples of both, because that's what we have in this country today, is we have examples of corporations acting in bad faith. That's, your crony capitalism, but you also have examples of corporations doing really good things. I mean, and we have history of American corporations doing really, really shitty things, namely it was in great part the American technology that enabled China to spy on their people the way that they do, because Cisco shipped them all the firewalls that had all of the filters in it with all of the intel and all of the IP. And if it weren't for that, maybe they would have found somebody else to do it. But, Cisco, huge router company, were the first people to volunteer. Oh, hey, let's do that. We see nothing morally wrong with that. We're going to allow the Chinese government to continue to oppress their people, and that's where I would like to see more morality, right? In some of these corporations that they are focusing more on, look at how much money this is going to cost us, but they're not looking at what are we actually doing with this product. Why are we enabling a bad actor to do bad things to their country, to their people. But I would have liked to have seen like the example, but I just don't think we're going to see that in Hollywood today. You're never going to see an example of a corporation doing something good. I feel like it's a terrible lost cause.
Well, they have a
Um,
couple of films about that, but yeah,
Oh, I was
they're
gonna
coming
say, well,
along.
ironically, you'll see
Thank
it in
you. But yeah,
Barbarian Invasion, which is a Canadian film by Denis Arcand, but where the banker, the bad evil banker, is the one who helps his father through dying and brings his socialist friends over and cleans up the medical system in essence to help his father die comfortably. And it's a beautiful movie about the charitableness even and the heart and the capacity of somebody who's a capitalist to even be better and more appreciative of life than his own father was.
now,
And so that presents capitalism in a very good light, ironically.
yes, I mean they do happen, but it's very. I think Jax, I agree with you there. It's rare that it happens, and it's definitely not in popular movies, right? Just so I agree. Like in general, you're not going to get a very positive pro-business stance in a major Hollywood film or show. I don't see that happening very often. I think the interesting thing to me about the backdrop of this, I think they get obviously a lot of things wrong about what, like they intermingle capitalist terminology with fascist terminology. But the thing is, I think the issue is if we, if we can't, so one, the show is not about that, right? That's just the backdrop. The show is about these people surviving in this wasteland and their journey into this, into an understanding of what happened and what they're going to do morally. They have three different types of moral systems and which one's right. That's really what it's, I think, about. This is just the backdrop. But there, I do think there's an interesting thing of, if you can imagine like 50 something years in the future, what terminology would an uber fascist dim hypothesis world use? It would use American terminology like fiduciary responsibility, right? And it would use that kind of thing, even though that's not really what they're doing anymore. So fiduciary responsibility, which they use in the show, means a specific kind of thing to a stakeholder, shareholder in your business, right? But they're using it as like, yes, it's that, but because we've intermingled force into business, which is the one parameter you should have the government for is to remove force from business operations, right? From business machinations. That's the whole point of a government in a sense, is to ensure property rights, make sure, I mean, this is Ayn Rand objectivist kind of theory. And that's what should be happening. And that's not happening in this world. So what kind of terminology though would they use in 2077? I do think they might use some of this stuff. Also, we have to take into consideration it's a utopian, dystopian, sci-fi Western. So it's like, it's 1950s style, right? It looks like 1950s, but they have, you remember in that opening shot with Walton Goggins doing that, they have Mr. Handy, they have that robot. So it's all very futuristic, even in 2077. Or excuse me, it's all retro future. It's a very interesting vibe.
I love that they did that.
Yeah,
I love that they made the computers retro. They make all the technology retro, even though it's in the future.
Yeah. So, okay, let's move on. So that's the kind of backdrop idea of what's happening in the show. Then you have these three characters. Like there's three main characters, and it goes from there's the ghoul, there's Lucy, Okie Dokie Lucy from the vault, and then there is the Brotherhood and
Maximus.
the young Maximus, the knight in the Brotherhood. So you have these three different things, basically all vying for what is the right way to operate it. I think this is what they're doing. What's the right way to operate in this new post-apocalyptic world, right? Like, what should you do? So what do you guys think of the arcs of these characters, the characteristics? Like, what are your thoughts on these three and their journey, or anything you have about these three characters? Any thoughts?
I'll
Go ahead.
I'll say my favorite character out of all this is Lucy. Even though, and Walton Goggins' character, the Ghoul's character, is a very close second. My least favorite character was Maximus. I found him to be fairly incompetent. And
I think he's supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But like, I don't, I mean, you don't like necessarily incompetent characters, but
he was very unlikable.
Yeah, he wasn't. And I can't figure out if one of the reason why I don't like him is just because the way he was written was unlikable, or if it was the way that the actor played him. There were some times when I felt like he was just acting, and it's something that I, ever since like Mark's been talking about it more, it's something that I'm really trying to like pick up on. But I just felt like he popped me out of there were times where he popped me out of the narrative. It was almost like he kind of broke character in a way. But I
was also the way written as this just weak, just not a heroic character at all.
You don't think he was ever
and
heroic?
I think he's supposed he was never, I don't think he was meant to be
he
heroic.
Lied, he put himself into that machine, he hid in it.
I disagree.
He was a coward.
I disagree.
And I don't think he was a coward either. But I want to hear more.
Yeah, why? Okay, so why?
So
why
I don't think that he was.
Coward?
I don't.
Like, you have to look at the whole character, right? There is an arc,
right? He started, and that's what I was about to say, is that his arc, he does start out as a,
Don't like
he
him
does
at
start out as
all.
a character, or sorry, as a coward, and not very heroic, but he does do.
Wait, why is he a coward even at the beginning though?
I never got the sense that he
Yeah,
was a coward.
where a coward from? What's the example?
Well, he took the identity of the guy that he was with and jumped into that machine. And then when the other guy comes to be there, he pretends to be the other guy so he hides his identity in that machine. And then when he gets down to the vault, he's just hanging out eating popcorn and oh, this is not like, there's nothing likable about him. He doesn't even know anything about sex. He just
Oh, wait a
Well,
second.
that's a whole thing.
Okay,
That's
so-
that's a brotherhood thing.
I'm just
That's-
saying,
that
what
represented-
was redeemable about him?
I don't think that's not redeemable. I just think that represented an innocence to him. Like,
Yeah,
I really like about the
Lucy's
Vault
innocence was way
and the
more
Brotherhood.
likable.
The thing that I really like about those two characters, the Vaulter and the Brotherhood guy, is there's an innocence and an idealism to them that they carry. They both have ideals, particularly Ellie, or whatever her name is, the Vaulter. She's got Lucy, sorry. She's got her real name, I think, is Ellie. She's got very, very strong ideals that she continuously tries to project onto the world that doesn't reflect those ideals back. There's a right way and a wrong way that things should go. And she's not wrong. But her arc and her journey is one of disillusionment. I mean, her father dropping from the level of a demigod, the sort of the leader of their community, to find out his history. In fact, the fact that he's missing makes her go on a quest to recover him. So she's the bravest person in the entire vault, even more brave than her brother. Goes out there all by herself on this quest for her father, and then to discover this ugly, despicable, murderous, and conscienceless, immoral truth about him is very disillusioning. I mean, it's the shattering blow that must have been to her innocence and to her idealism. Is at a certain point, I thought she played very well but who knows if it's eye stuff going in the eyes or what. Because she didn't project the type of actor who could hit those emotional depths, but she does. The Knight, I didn't have as many problems with his acting either. I thought they set him up as ambitious, which gave us a nice bait and switch early on, when you think he's the person that hurt his friend in order to get a superior position, but he's in fact not. He's actually honorable, and he finds that Titus is not honorable. Titus is a coward himself. Titus is the one that pushes the unarmed squire to go in front of him in the cave.
Fight the bear, yeah.
Which he does. He fights the bear. And when he finds out that Titus is
the abomination.
An abomination. That's right. And when the abomination, that takes balls. Sorry.
A little bit.
Do that.
And
then when he finds out Titus is going to betray him, even though he saved his life, well, he does what he has to do. And yes, he does conceal his identity from the new squire for a time, and he does mistreat him for a time. But it's
that's because he'll be killed.
That's because death is at the end of this.
Yeah, like he's.
And so what I feel for the two main characters, to me, the Goggins character, the ghoul, is not changeable. He's sort of the static character throughout. And the other two are idealists who get disillusioned throughout, right? Like when he comes back to the Brotherhood and sees the wider machinations of the leadership of the Brotherhood, and that they're really all about power. I mean, that's probably very disillusioning to him as well. So I saw two idealists who were on the road to being derailed from their idealism, and now I do want to see what they do now. I want to see what happens now that Lucy knows what's going on, and her feet are now touching the ground. So I'm sure her ideals are now touching grass, because she's with the ghoul. And I knew the ghoul and her would get together. I knew that was going to be a combination that was going to happen eventually. I just wasn't sure how they did it. I'm glad they did it the way they did.
Yeah. It all came together nicely.
I want to see how fierce the combination is.
As long as Maximus dies.
He's not going to die.
No,
So, okay.
It's okay for Maximus to revel in comforts for a while, because that's one of the bad things that I thought they were saying about capitalism, though. In that moment, it's like, oh, look how distracted people get by material well-being, that they miss the deeper stuff. You know, they lose their
See,
conscience.
and the whole time I saw that, I totally thought that they were like drugging him or something. I thought that there was something in the food that, like, oh, here's your welcome packet, and he's eating the food,
So,
and it
but you
causes him
guys,
to be like, you know, just like totally compliant.
I think one piece,
And
so one
not
piece you may
care.
be missing is that, like, remember when Lucy gives the water to that guy and he like drinks every last drop, and it's like, when someone gives you water, you drink. Like, yep. So Maximus has lived his whole life from, he lived a couple years in Sandy Shades, which was the beginnings of a new civilization, by the way, which was bombed by the father, right? Because it was a counter civilization that was working, right? That's part of what was going on there. And he bombed this new civilization. And he lived his first couple years in that, but his whole life is eating like spam out of a can, right? His whole life is living, getting beaten up, getting, crapped on, drinking dirty water, like doing what you had to do to survive. And so he gets some, this is the moment with the guy, the moment you didn't like is the moment that about him is the moment I turned, where I didn't like him at first either, but I did, because he, all of a sudden, this guy with really, questionable morals, like he just wants to kill the people who hurt him. That's his mission. Remember, he says that. Why are you here? Because I want to, get payback on the people that hurt me. And the Brotherhood was a way to do that. And then he meets Lucy. And then she takes him to a vault, this kind of perfect paradise, this utopian world where he's got popcorn. Remember, he walks out with that caviar. He's like, and this as an acting moment, I thought was one of amazing things for me. At least he portrayed this well. He was like accusing the guy. He's like, hey, what is this? It is because he's like, this is so good. He was like, what the fuck is this? And it was like, and because he's like in this like beautiful Eden for the first time, and yet he gives it up. He gives it up and he gets on his suit of armor and he goes out and he fights for Lucy, even though he's messed up. He's like, oh, sorry. But the point is that he tried to do that because he falls in love with her, and it's his love for her, which is what a knight is, right? A knight in old stories is trying to save the damsel, and he becomes that when, he was trying to do that and he failed.
Were you buying the chemistry between them? Because I didn't feel any chemistry between the two of them.
I mean, I think the not feeling any chemistry is part of the humor of it, for sure. I mean, he doesn't know anything about women or sex, obviously. I mean, he thinks that your private parts literally blow up.
Yeah, but like, chemistry just happens whether you know about it or not.
But see, that's like
I liked their kiss a lot. I won't lie. I do like their kiss was funny and cute, and it was because this whole thing is like a parody. Because remember the two heads that they're holding, they touched when they kissed. It was like, I mean, it was
gross.
It was weird. Yeah, it's a weird thing, but that's the show. That's Fallout.
What was an amazing phenomenon to me, that the physical fact of carrying those rotting heads through steaming never actually seemed to bother them at all.
Like, they stinky. They all stinky.
It would have been a stinky, vile prospect.
No, but I mean, the people there are going to be stinky too. In an apocalypse,
Vault girl, but he says to the Vault girl,
flies and magnets.
You smell good.
Yeah. Well, remember, he says like, "What's this hot water?" He's like, "What's hot water?" He's like, "What is that?" He doesn't know. Like,
that's cool, but she's the one who's carrying the head around like it's,
That's true. Good point. Yeah.
She's the one who's been living the life of luxury.
Suspense of disbelief, right there. He's gonna let that one go.
Whether or not you found Maximus to be distasteful because his original reason for getting into the knighthood was to get back at the people who hurt him. I personally like that. That's very Greek. I'm totally into that.
I wasn't against it. That was just his thing.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with that. I also
thought he was idealistic too. I thought the ideals of the Brotherhood mattered to him.
He became idealistic. Yes. Yeah, I agree. And that's what it seems like, there's a Thomas Sowell book called Conflict of Visions. That's what I think this is about. Like, this whole story is conflict of visions in this new dystopian world, and and that's why even like I loved all the sci-fi Western dystopian utopian elements, because they, like, a lot of what they used from those elements, those genres, is that idea of what is the perfect society, right? And like the Western is savagery versus civilization. And so you have the ghoul. Well, what's the ghoul? The ghoul is a man, a bounty hunter. He's not a man, he's a bounty hunter now. Who, how did he start off? He played a character who was the good sheriff in a Western, right? In Westerns. That's who Cooper was. Cooper was a Western hero who, and there's
Who didn't want to kill anybody on screen because he didn't think
he
that's
didn't
what
want
a
to
sheriff
kill,
would do.
he didn't want to kill an unarmed man, right? Who he
Yeah.
could have arrested. So yes, it was a change in his, and I think we've talked about this on our high noon discussion, right? The idea of, or maybe it was one of the other ones, but like the idea of, you know, killing a bad guy, or you know, what's the morality of that? And he's questioning that. He's like, my character doesn't do that. And then remember what happens is the producer was like, well, people now want to see your character, that your character can be pushed far enough to do this. And I do want to say, if for all the listeners out there, if you're ever watching a TV show, a movie, or you're reading a book, or you're watching a play, if there's a movie within a movie, or a play within a play, or a story within a story, pay attention and ask yourself, what is this going on to? Because there's a reason why writers do that. They're trying to give you a microcosm of the entirety of the theme encapsulated there. And that's, I think, what's happening is that, you know, how can you push somebody far enough where they become the bad guy? And that's who the ghoul becomes. He becomes the bad guy. He doesn't care about anything. He kills that like family, that kind of innocent family, because they're in his way. Like, he's a bad dude. He's been killing people. He's just about that money. But we find out there's one motivating thing that makes him really interesting. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in season 2 of, you know, where the F is my family. Like, and Walton Goggins delivers that line, man. Like, I was like,
he's such a good actor. I love him as
I would have
actor.
I would have trembled if he said that to me. I don't know. Sorry, man.
Sort of like Jack Nicholson said when he played the Joker, work the suit. There's very little you have to do, which is what I love about Walter too. He's a minimalist, which you should be if you can. He's a minimalist, and you know, there's a lot of talking that face does.
Yeah, and he has such a good face.
I mean, ghoul face. You don't
but all of his face too. And I think he has like well, he was in a movie, American Ultra. I don't know if you guys ever saw him in that. And just the way he's able, like, he plays this laugher guy in that character, and he just does a great job. Anyway, so he does a good job. So let's move on from Maximus. I like Maximus. I like that whole brotherhood theme of what they were trying to do, of this guy trying to become a knight. I mean, it's like a Knight's Tale type thing. And he's, you know, there's some real world elements. Like, I feel like the writers of this show, Jonathan Nolan, who's Christopher Nolan's brother, by the way, that he really understands all these genres. He understands medieval literature. He has an English degree, just like his brother, Christopher Nolan. So I saw those elements there, and I really appreciated what he was trying to do. So let's move on to, let's talk about Lucy a little bit more. So do you guys, go ahead, Jax. Did you have something else before?
No, I was just going to talk about Lucy. So I'm glad you're moving on to Lucy.
Well, I was going to ask about if you understand, because it took me the second viewing to fully understand what was going on. That's why I'm asking. I'm not trying to insult anybody. This is myself. Did you understand what was going on with the experiment of the 3 vaults? Because, you know, every vault is an experiment. You guys got that, right? So there was, so theoretically, they're in the game. I know there are some vaults that are just, I think, generic vaults, like actual vaults, but very few. Most of them are experiments. The most famous one, if you like look on the internet, is Vault 11, which required you to choose one person in the vault to be sacrificed every year. And then they did that until there was only 5 original people left. And then the vault people refused to do this anymore. And then the vault like went into like Eden, and it says, okay, you won. That was the experiment. How long would it take you to not kill somebody? Because if you don't kill somebody, then everybody dies, was the threat. I forgot to say that. So that was the experiment. How long? But everyone has an experiment, every vault. So what did you
I thought that and it could be because I've only seen the series once, and I haven't played the game, and I didn't do like a crap ton of research.
Right.
for
did
it
a little bit of research.
because I think that if you're going to put something on TV or you're going to put something in a movie house, it needs to stand on its own, regardless of backstory, or sorry, regardless of what's gone on before it, whether it's from, adapted from a novel or from a video game. I think that a work of art has to stand on its own.
Sure.
So if my understanding of what was going on in the vaults was critical, like what I understood was Vault 33 was like the good vault, because you hear that messaging all the time from Walton Goggins' wife, who is saying, I want to put us in the good vault, because she's in these board meetings. We're like, oh, what if we like cut their arm off and, expose them to deadly nuclear radiation, or
There's all this crazy vault.
just a bunch of evil geniuses, right? That twirling their
Genius.
mustaches. Yeah. And so I thought that Vault 33 was supposed to be the, kind of like the normal vault where, you had like good old fashioned American ideals from the 1950s that are, mixed in with whatever they've learned in the last 200 years. And it seemed to be the vault that was providing better education, even though, obviously they were lying to them the whole time. But you didn't see too many freaky things. And then when you go to the other vault, what was it, Vault 4, whatever, where people had like all the experiments, like the guy with one eye and the guy with the nose on his, cheek or forehead or whatever. You're like, oh, that's not a good vault. So all that I really got were good vaults, bad vaults, straight up
And controlling
horror
vault.
vaults.
The controlling
Yeah.
vault where they slept and they had the brain.
Well, they explained
Yeah.
what the 31, 32, 33 triangle of vaults was. You're correct. And I agree, in the show should explain all the essentials. So it is in the show what's going on. So in Vault 4, they do talk about that the original vault, which goes back, remember, this is 220 years earlier, was an experimental run by scientists, but then the monsters took over and killed all the scientists. And so they just have this vault. And then basically what happens later is these freaks, like the guy with one eye, right? Who's a great actor too, I thought. Like his uncle was the monster that killed that scientist in the video they showed to Lucy. And that's what he's like, Uncle Tom or something like that, right? And it's a weird humor of the show. And so that's what happened in that vault. But every vault has its own story. And you do see that with Vault 4, and then Vault 31, 32, 33, they explain in the show as well. And I don't know how clear it was, but I mean, because I don't, again, I saw it twice, and that it helped me to see it twice to kind of see. But so 33, where the Lucy comes from, is actually, and I think 32 as well, was the breeding ground for Bud's Buds. So Bud's Buds was an executive training program. And so he wanted to have his executives give them lots of time to breed the best executives to take over the world after, you get plenty of time after the apocalypse. That's the theory. And you needed hundreds of years to do that. And, in the meantime, 32 and 33, and I don't know exactly what happened to 32 with the famine exactly, to be honest. But, oh no, they killed each other because they found out the truth or something. Because the truth was that it was all a charade. Right? Because they're all waiting for Reclamation Day. That's what Lucy's waiting for. Like, she thinks there's almost nothing up there, but then she finds
out. Yeah, she thinks there's nothing above ground, that there's no life
some
above
monsters
ground.
And things like that, some few people. But then she realizes that she learns about Shady Sands, which was another civilization. So they could have left hundreds of years ago. Right? So that's why they were so angry, I think, with each other. So that was the whole thing. And that's like Lucy's arc is going from this, I think you guys, this ideal person about 1950s America and doing the right thing. And then she goes into the wasteland, and can she hold on to a lot of that? And at the end, it's a little questionable about her morals to some degree. It's definitely evolved, at least, I think. She shoots her mother, although her mother's not really her mother anymore, but she shoots her mother in the head. Right. And
One of the things
I
really
that was an
liked
act of mercy.
about,
probably.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Probably.
I absolutely agree. That was that was love, actually. But
maybe.
one of the things that I really like about Lucy as a character is she makes everybody around her better.
Hmm. Yeah.
She makes
They strive
Maximus
for her.
better.
Yeah.
She makes the Ghoul actually better. And she kind of reminds him of what humanity is. But what I also really like about her is that she doesn't evade reality, even though she's been raised to. She's been, she's been raised to think of the world as this, her future world as this utopia.
Yeah.
And she's, you could also see her, even though she's trained in martial arts and she knows weapons and stuff, but you could sort of see her as this pacifist. Her first go-to is to always try and reason with people, and can't there be like we can all be happy here. And then her first experience with, this is not what the world is like. People are trying to kill her and turn her into a sex slave or harvest her parts. What I like is she doesn't like have this existential crisis of oh well, my idealism doesn't work with this reality. She sort of brings her she changes her ideology with what she's learning in reality, and I feel like that's a very objectivist thing to do, right? You're constantly reevaluating judgments based on new information available. Whereas I think other characters, I can't think of them here in Fallout, but I think of like the big characters in like Memento or Matrix with the guy that doesn't want to take the blue pill. He just wants to go back to just, I want a steak dinner. I know that this isn't steak that I'm eating, but I want to go and I want to have a steak dinner. I just want to pretend like the world is fine. And then also the guy from I can't remember the example that I literally just brought up, but that's a good enough example. I really like where Lucy's arc goes. She develops in a very heroic way for me, and I love that she makes the people around her better. At least the people that are close to her.
Yeah, I agree. She's a good character. Anybody else on Lucy? No.
I eventually liked Lucy. I had problems with her at first.
Really?
I always liked her idealism.
Mm.
I liked her innocence, and I liked her courage. Her her innocence just made her so brave, and that she would just not even think twice about doing a lot of the things that she did. And she always had tried to appeal to the better angels of people's nature. So I liked that, a lot of that. And now that she's sort of seen that her idols have feet of clay, I want to see where that goes in season 2, because that may be she's a formidable person.
Mm-hmm.
A grounded, formidable a grounded idealist who's formidable. She's going to be extra formidable in season 2. I want to see where that goes.
Yeah, and she's very brave, and I think that's a good part of her character, and she's trying to do the right thing. She tries to stand up for that guy that before she knows that he's the guy that she's looking for. I don't think she knows the guy with the guy that escaped the enclave. That she cuts his head off, right? I don't think when she meets
Michael
him.
Emerson, by the way, Michael Emerson from Lost.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So did you work with him? Was he part of the?
He killed me. He killed Jake. He kills
he killed
Jake.
you. Oh, okay. Oh, that's the guy. Okay. So he does a good job. And when she was there with him, I don't think she knew that he had the thing that everyone was looking for. And yet she still stands up for him. Right. And that's cool. I think that was a, good part of her character. And I like her. Plus I don't know how anybody could not fall in love with those big eyes. I don't know about you guys, but I thought those big eyes were the innocence of them. No.
Yeah, she's got.
I liked her eyes.
Yeah, she's an eye actress, I think. Okay, last character, the Ghoul. We've talked a little bit about, and we could still talk about the acting of anybody, but I just thought we could look at each one of these. So, we have a Ghoul that starts off with Cooper. I think he has the most of the flashbacks. You don't really get flashbacks much with the other characters. Maximus has that one flashback of Shady Sands. Lucy, I don't think has any flashbacks. You have a flash to her brother doing things in the vault to discover her truth, right? But you don't actually see like flashbacks to her youth. But the Ghoul, that's who carries us through exactly what happened. Right. And So he has a very interesting arc. I thought, and there was a lot of hype before I saw this show of that opening scene, and I was wondering if it would pull, if it would, if it would live up to the hype. But there was, I listened to it on a couple like descriptions of it and just talks about it on podcasts before it came out, and there was a lot of hype about it, and I thought it was really good. And his whole arc, like the questions that are asked and answered in those first like 3 minutes, like there's so much information visually packed. I mean, this is storytelling at its best, in my opinion. It's just, this is so good, that first 3 minutes. And anyway, I didn't know if you guys had thoughts
You
about
mean the first 3 minutes of the pilot when he's at
of
the
episode one. Yeah. So it's,
Birthday party.
when he's at the house.
yeah, so it's Cooper, right? And so what do we learn about him, right? He's an ex A-list Hollywood star, and we learn that right away. They say that, right, about him. Like, what's his name doing here? Blah blah blah, doing parties, alimony, right? That's what they assume. And then they call him a pinky. They call him a commie, and which is interesting. And then there's a lot of good imagery of us really liking his character, because even though they're insulting him, he's still like just doing his job, smiling, doing what they want, and then just walking away
He's
and
being a good father.
being a good father. And he's like, what did
Yeah.
they say? Oh yeah, you have the best damn helper there is, or best darn helper there is. And then you really sympathize with the little girl, because I think this is one of the ultimate themes in Fallout overall. Is she's standing outside the window looking in to this beautiful lavish world. So it's like the haves and haves not idea. And she wants to have cake, and he's like, I'll see what I can rustle you up. And then I have to say, Mark, I don't know, what do you think about that acting at that with dropping of the bomb? But that's some good acting. And I actually watched an interview of Walton. I think it's Walton Goggins, right?
It is Walton. Yeah.
Walton
Yeah.
Goggins.
Walton.
Yeah. Like I've seen an interview of him talking about that, and it's really interesting. So I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on
What
the
did
character.
he say? What did he say in the interview?
Well, okay, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the acting first, but I'll tell you. So what he said is that his role in his mind was, in a sense, to kind of show to the audience watching, to have them experience the feeling of that happening for all of humanity. Like, he represented emotionally all of humanity in a sense. And if you look at his face, it's a really tender moment, right? Like, he's telling his daughter how to look at the nuke, and then she's like, is it your thumb or mine? And it's just like, whoa, right? And then he like looks up, and he's like, that's just a fire. And then he stands up, and then just, I don't know how actors do this, but like, you guys have like, his whole face just drops, and like all the muscles just like die. And it was in my heart stopped a little bit when he did that.
Yeah, I don't know that you do it by holding on to some wide abstraction that you have to be
Well, I don't know if
representative
he did that in the moment. Yeah.
of the human. You have to be representative of the entire human race experiencing that thing. You are representative of the entire human race when you're acting. Every time you're in a scene, that's what makes people identify with you, and the way that you they identify with you to the degree that you're identifying with the moment. You're seeing a nuclear holocaust take place before your eyes as the audience member, and he has to do very little, in fact, to actually take in the enormity of that situation. And it is almost the situation is so extreme that there's a lot of different ways you could go with it that would work.
What do you think of his way?
Well, I think Walton is a very good actor, so I think he always makes very interesting choices. So and or spontaneously experiences things that are creative. So I liked his thing, but he could have fallen down on his knees and stared into the nuclear sun with tears streaming down his face. That would have been the same. He did a much more subtle version of that. From what I remember, and it's still good. You don't have to do a lot because everybody else is seeing this and feeling the enormity too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that, that's what, he was channeling as an actor. That he was
Well,
that he
okay,
was
probably not
channeling,
in
like,
the moment.
but what I saw in that scene, I love that scene as well. I really, really loved it. And I loved it because what I saw is it was a father who wasn't trying to deceive his child about what's coming in reality. And even but he's and in the face of that, so they're looking outward. I thought it was a great shot that Walton Goggins and his daughter are looking outward to what reality is. Everybody on the inside is looking at the TV because
Mm,
they don't want to, again, they don't want to admit what reality is. And so you have this really great, I think you have this really great juxtaposition, and it was the shot. The shot was on the people looking at the TV, and then on
mhm.
the backs of Walton Goggins and his daughter looking at this ginormous mushroom cloud. Which it was. I thought it was really well done. I think
Kirk,
he's such a great actor.
Kirk, he could have been imagining in his own mind what he saw on 9/11 when he saw the buildings come down in front of him.
Mm,
The look
yeah,
is the same. It's all the same.
yeah.
And what he's seeing in his mind's eye to
Mm,
get him to that place, you're taking care of it because of the narrative that you're witnessing, and the rest is a
yeah.
person. I guarantee you, he just said something that sounded really very. It sounds. I'm frankly a little unpleasantly surprised at the pretentiousness of that comment because he said
Well, go watch the thing for yourself. I mean, maybe he's just
like
doing
a
that for the
guy.
interview.
You can't act that, but
Yeah.
I can see the buildings fall again in my mind's eye, and I can let that impact me.
Well,
And
okay.
or
So
any other
I
thing that you
agree,
think
obviously. Yeah. Go ahead.
you could be witnessing in your imagination. It could be any of a dozen tragedies that nobody else would find earth shaking except you. But as long
Yeah.
as it's earth shaking to you, the rest of the it's the relationship between the artist and the viewer, right? You get the generalized perspective as the viewer, that even though the artist is doing something very particular, and in the case of an actor, it may be something completely outside the scope of your understanding, but nonetheless, you're taking it because you know the theme and the narrative, and you're witnessing these images as being something within you, right?
Yes.
You
Yeah. I
feel
mean, I
that?
don't I don't know if that's what he was doing in the moment, I guess. It was an interview where he was trying to probably sell people on watching the show. And he was trying to impress upon them the impressiveness of this opening scene and the dropping of the bomb. And he was trying to convey this idea of, what his character was experiencing with his daughter. And that's what, so just to defend Walton, because I don't want to speak for him. You should watch the interview, but
He's experiencing, holy fuck, the world is coming to an end.
yeah.
What the fuck am I going
So
to do?
okay, so let's talk about his character a little bit. So the arc that he goes through, right? So he's Cooper, and it's an interesting thing because he has, he's at the beginning, he's divorced. He has his daughter with him. He's a has-been actor, right? Like he used to be an A-list actor. Now he's doing birthday parties, and the world ends. Like we get all that information in just a couple minutes, and then it cuts to 219 years later, and we're in a vault. And then, but what about his character? What about his art? Like, you guys have any thoughts or comments on that?
I mean, doesn't
I
there
thought,
there seems to be a lot of the idea of idealism being sort of smashed and turned into something else, right? Like
Mm,
ideals, because he was an all-American idealist who believed enough in the American values to fight in the war, to resist the communist
He was in
infiltration.
the military, wasn't he? He has a military
yes,
background.
He was in
Yeah,
yes.
the war. Yeah, he was in a war, and
yeah.
so he's a very patriotic guy, and
It's like
who's
John Wayne.
yeah, he's a very much a John Wayne character, the archetypal American male who believes all the American values, as John Wayne did himself in real life, becoming disillusioned. I mean, I really feel like a thematic element in this story is disillusionment, which
Mhm.
isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think if you're under an illusion of some kind that isn't in touch with reality, or your ideals aren't touching grass in some way, it's best to get them down there and rooted in what is. But I'm hoping it's not anti-idealistic. I'm hoping it's just, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, so yeah, I know what you're saying.
everybody falls from an idealistic pedestal, it seems, to something else.
Well, yeah, and the show's title is Fallout, right? And it's about falling out. And I think you're right that that's a big part of it. I mean, one of the things that I think the show is also parodying is the certain ideas of like this, what would happen if the scientists ruled the world, right? So that's part of it. And they're saying it would be ridiculous, right? It would be horrible. It wouldn't be good. And you'd have all these stupid things. They're not the right ones to do. Now, I don't think the show has here's the right version. I don't think it has a view on that. And I would be surprised if these writers with their viewpoints would be up, even though I like Jonathan Nolan, I like a lot of stuff he's done. He did The Dark Knight. I think he wrote The Dark Knight. And so, but again, it's like a kind of darkened idealistic view, right? It's not necessarily, a idealized view of anything at its best. So I think you're right that there's a element of the theme being what's the fallout of all these characters, including Lucy. But Lucy does seem to still maintain a lot of her ideals to the very end, but we don't know what's going to happen next with her. Now she's going with the ghoul. So
I love that. I love that scene with Lucy and the ghoul when he basically drops her off at the robot factory to get all of her organs harvested, and she's talking to him about the golden rule, before that, do unto others and kind of thing. And then she gets in there, and I love that scene with the robot. Like, oh my God, I'm not going to turn you into a sex slave. I'm just going to harvest your organs.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the name of that episode, by the way, is Golden Rule.
Yeah, and she has to fight her way out of there, basically, right? But she doesn't forget about the ghoul, who has done nothing kind to her. He has done nothing good to her. And I think she drops like all the vials at his in front of him, and she's like, golden rule, motherfucker. But I mean, I think that's a really interesting turning point for the ghoul in his arc. He sees this kind of act of kindness from this person, because I think that he's all that he's ever seen being topside, right? When he's like, I guess he gets buried and then people dig him up to, go off and kill people to be a bounty hunter. But he hasn't seen anything good. He hasn't seen anything benevolent. He's seen no kindness. He's only seen death. And I mean, of course that's going to change your perspective, especially over the course of hundreds of years, as you're kind of losing more and more of your soul and humanity.
And he's looking for his family. His family was taken from him 220 years earlier in a nuclear blast that his wife was a part of, we've learned. Right? His wife was a part of that process.
And it makes me wonder, because his daughter was, I hope that they explain how it was that he ended up surviving. And how
I'm sure they will. But I mean, we do know in the show, we do know that ghouls are the result of overexposure to radiation. And like one guy is turned into a ghoul through a chemical process. So we can assume at this point that Walton Goggins probably, on the day that they dropped, he just was overexposed with radiation or something like that, and was turned into.
Well, and his daughter would have been as well, right? Because I assume
we don't know. I mean, it could be something else. That's you're right. Maybe it's possible. I don't know. Because there's also, I mean, he could have, maybe she got in. Like, why was? Because remember, the wife, she says in the board meeting and to her husband, and I have no reason to disbelieve this, that the whole reason she's doing everything is to protect her daughter.
Right.
So, and what other technology do we know they have? So they have the cryogenics, and they have the ability to
fusion,
clone.
Right?
They have cloning, and so it's very possible that there's some cloning because otherwise she would have to. How would she be alive for 220 years? She's either got to be cryogenically frozen, Maybe she got in
Right.
there and he didn't. Maybe he got her in there right at the last second. They didn't let him in. You know, maybe
He
they
got
didn't.
her at the bomb shelter.
Yeah, like we
Yeah,
don't
could
know.
have
We have
been.
no, there's a lot of scenarios that could have happened. And then they're like, no, you're not allowed because you were a commie or whatever. And like, how do they get him to be? Why do people think he's a commie? Because he's clearly not a commie in the beginning. He does go to a commie meeting, right? He goes to that one meeting of Hollywood Forever.
Which has one of the worst lines
Yeah,
on
I
the
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
they just whatever it is, I think I wrote it down, but it's like communist is just another name for somebody who's thinking or something like that.
Not insane.
Communist.
Not
Yeah,
insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
awful.
So yeah. But yeah, and I think it is an interesting speech, what she says. If you listen, so I didn't catch this the first time, but if you listen to her speech, I thought it was a really interesting, relevant speech to our own time, in a sense, because she talks, especially if it's a little difficult because, as an objectivist, you kind of have certain qualms with things, right? But if you look at if you watch that speech that I think her name is, it's not Maldive at that point. That's what she becomes later. I don't know what she's like
Yeah,
Michelle or something at that point, but
yeah.
or Heather, I don't know. But anyway, so she's talking about like they told you that the dropping of the atom bomb would be the end of war. They told you that America would be a place of prosperity and peace. They told you all these things, and none of those things are happening. The opposites of all those things are happening. Well, look at ourselves today. Like they said, World War II was the end of all. Like we're in a European war again in the world, right? We have Israel in a war to its annihilation. We have all this stuff happening in the world when all these promises were made to us, and we grew up with these promises of a utopia, and we're getting the opposite. And that's the speech she's making, right, at that point. And then she says a line that pisses off Cooper, which she says, we now have more in common with the people that we're at war with than with, founders or like early Americans or something like that. And that's when Goggins' character says, I've heard enough of this horse crap or whatever, horse shit. And then he walks out, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that that's correct, but I think the ideas behind it in terms of representing capturing something in the ethos of the world today, there's something she's capturing that this show is capturing that is worthy of our contemplation. Now, I don't think they're right, but it's popular for a reason.
No, I think they are right in the sense that the way they identify corporations is something that people are seeing today. They're seeing cartels organizing together and attempting to rule our lives through a technocracy. Technocracy, I guess, and they see the collusion between government and technological organizations as a very dangerous precedent that's being set. They're blaming it on capitalism, but it's really not the case. Even if this story does, it's really a thing that's happening. When organizations become cartels that have political and economic power, they're going to cause a lot of damage. They're going to distort the system. They're going to hurt it. And yes, people have made, when World War I happened, it was the war to end all wars. Unfortunately, the philosophical content that was coming out at the time, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, only precipitated worse things. And the philosophical content that's coming out of the universities today from the 60s onward is facilitating even something more horrific, potentially horrific. So I doubt the answer that Fallout is going to come up with is a philosophical problem that needs to be resolved. But that's the case. These promises are made, but they're made by technocrats and bureaucrats and statists who then attempt to make good on their promises by asserting more raw power in the world, which causes more distortions, which requires more raw power and tyranny and ugliness and fighting, and that creates war. It's by its nature. Rand used to talk about how just the regulatory state itself was a low-level civil war. It's every citizen against every other citizen to get a piece of the pie, right?
Yeah.
The welfare state. You have to be a part of, as a 50-plus-year-old man. And should I join AARP or one of these other groups, the lobby
Poll,
groups?
I think she called, right?
Yeah, you need political pull in order to be relevant, in order to succeed. And that's a war of all against all.
Yeah, no,
Which
I
I
agree
think
with
is
that.
the
Some
biggest kind of overall misunderstanding on capitalism and corporations, is that it's not capitalism if the corporations are just another arm of the government. And just because the
I think they
corporations
are the
didn't
government in
necessarily,
this story.
I think that they
Yeah,
become the government
yeah, they
for
basically
sure.
become
And
the
I
government.
mean, and we see that also. We it's dangerously close to that as well in The Boys, with Bot Tech, right? The other Amazon Prime TV show.
The
But
robot, right, with corporation evil. I
Oh,
mean,
I
it's
never
all
saw Miss Robot.
same thing.
Oh, okay.
yeah, but what I think that they really do miss is that true capitalism is unregulated and is effectively untouchable by government up until the point that a corporation begins to infringe on the rights of individuals and property rights.
Mhm. Yeah.
In a theoretical world, but that is not what corporations, many corporations are doing today, and a lot of it is out of necessity. A lot, unfortunately, is out of um, needing to, like, well, if you're going to succeed, you have to have, a stake in the government. And so a lot of them are kind of doing what they have to do. But I will say, though, it still was just so hard for me to get over just the ardent evilness of that boardroom discussion. Like, oh, what if we did this? And what if we did this? And I
Yeah,
mean, it
they were
almost
evil, and
became
that's the
comical to
point.
me.
Well, it is
Yeah,
comical. The whole show has a farcical element to it, and that's part of
yeah,
that's part of what they're going for sure. It is
yeah.
farce, it is parody. They're doing that, and I think they did. I think they landed it well in terms of that's a tightrope to do. Where it's like you have dystopian, you have utopian, you have this action, and they're trying to do all this together. And I thought they did a pretty good job of all of that. But Jax, I agree with you in terms of their understanding of capitalism is not Randian. It's not objectivism. But it is it's probably a good case study of one of many of the kind of thoughts if you have the wrong ideal of what capitalism is, because essentially what I think they assume capitalism is the popular notion that it's just competition. And so, like, what's competition toward the extremes? Well, obviously we have to have competition over resources, but then if we have to compete, well, why don't we have, now they have this scenario of, well, let's compete over who has the best ideal the best ideal of civilization. And so we're going to destroy the world. We're going to have these 237 volts or whatever it is, and we'll figure it out. And let the best man win is the idea. And that's not capitalism at all. That's a complete misunderstanding of capitalism in its best form and its best formulation.
It's
But it
it's
is a popular
subjectivism, and
view.
it's platonic as well, right? Because you're giving license to, these are the philosopher kings. I think, Mark, you had mentioned that earlier. These are the philosopher kings in the boardroom, and they're going to decide what's best for the
Well, they're
world,
going to
because the
experiment
world
though.
can't decide for themselves.
Well, they're going to
Sure, they're
experiment.
going to decide by experimenting, but they've still put themselves in the chair of being the deciders,
Yeah.
because they're
Oh, I see
actively
what you're saying. Yes.
disillusioning
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rest of the world. To the rest of the world, they think the rest of the world are the ones in Plato's cave, tied to chains. They can only see the shadows on the wall. They're the true ascenders in order
Yeah.
to
Sure.
learn what inherently the right thing to do is, and they're just going to experiment on a bunch of people along the way.
Yeah, well, because you got to do what you got to do, break a couple eggs. All right, that's what you need to do. That's the idea. I mean, that was a real quote.
I'm sure that was what Dr.
Drop a few
Mengele thought
bombs.
too.
What's that? Jennifer, what'd you say?
I said, drop a few bombs.
Drop a few bombs. Yeah, that's how you make an omelet. You got to break some eggs to make an omelet. And if you want a perfect society, and I mean, look, I don't think that some of these dictators would disagree in their heart of hearts, right? Like, they're willing to kill millions of people to have the ideal, quote unquote, civilization. And that's what I think this is parodying, is that, and showing that in its own way. I think Putin has that. Yeah, I mean, he wants the Mother Russia ideal of Russia all over the world, and this kind of, he's Jordan Peterson saying like represents the right or whatever. And that's why we should support him. Like, what? Okay, but he has an ideal. If he had all this power, he would probably try something like that. And so I think there's something to that, and that the show's depicting today. So any other? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I agree.
Yeah. Any last thoughts before we wrap up on the show? Fallout.
I can't wait to see season 2. But I'd also be interested in getting your guys' perspective on Invasion, because I sort of got obsessed with Invasion and started watching the first season of that instead.
Okay, so maybe we'll talk about that after the show. Maybe we'll do that next when you come back, because we're gonna take a little bit of a hiatus. But Mark, do you want to end with your story of actors? So you were telling about your student, and you hope he doesn't take your season 2 because he has a season 2. So now you're competing with your student, or what's going on?
Oh no, well, I was saying it's a Prime show. Our
Amazon
show,
Prime.
a Prime show, Amazon Prime. Our show is an Amazon Prime.
Oh, yours is also, that's right. American Rust is what we're talking about.
Fallout already has an automatically massive audience because it was a very popular video game. So they've got like 3.2 million hours of views. It's very big. They're gonna.
I think it's 2.2 billion.
Billion?
I think it's with a B, isn't it?
So that's a massive form of competition.
Yeah.
That
No, it's not views. It was 2.5 billion minutes watched.
Oh, okay.
That's what I meant, minutes, not hours.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes more sense. Because
that means people are watching it all the way to the end. They're not turning it off. It's a very popular show. So, I don't want Amazon to be, they have almost endless resources. I'd like them to spend a little bit in Pittsburgh on our show. That would be great. But
American Rust 2 or 3. You're trying for 3.
Yeah. We're going for 3. So hopefully it
season 2 was really good.
Oh, good.
I'm in the middle of season 2. It's awesome. I like season 2 better than season 1.
Me too. Yeah.
I as well liked season 2 better than season 1 for a million reasons, but I thought it was a lot more sticky storytelling, the kind of storytelling I like, where things get really fucked up.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah. So I'm just hoping that Rod the best, of course, because he's a good kid. But I also hope that our show gets picked up.
Yeah, I hope your show does get picked up.
For the benefit of our viewers, because I don't know if they were privy to that conversation, who is the actor that you're talking about from Fallout?
Oh yeah,
that was your student.
He mentioned that at the beginning, but
oh, he did. Okay, I didn't know if we were recording or not.
Yeah, but go ahead. Who is? Remind us.
Rod Luzzi. He plays McPhee, one of the candidates for. Is it Overseer?
Yeah, Overseer of 33.
Neck brace who votes for Betty.
Yeah.
He's sort of really sweet, a good opposite to the other guy, who's also a very fine actor too.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job with the Overseers, where it was like they were competing, but they're both really weaselly kind of and weak, right? And they kind of
they're beta guys.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I thought about the Brotherhood. It's just a bunch of beta people.
You thought Maximus was beta?
The entire Brotherhood. I thought it was like that was not the military I know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not modern military. It's
definitely stepping behind the curtain and seeing that Oz is an old man. It's a little bit disconcerting to see Michael Rappaport was Titus. It's like, whoops.
Yeah. Well, he did a good job though, because he was so
that must have, I when I watched that, I was like, wait, is that Michael Rappaport? I'm like, that must have just been one of those things where he was like on set for he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do it.
Yeah, it's probably like a couple a day or two. I don't know enough about acting. But
yeah, that's like a few days shoot.
Because he wasn't in the suit. Probably they just take the suit off.
No, that was just the voice.
Shot. Yeah, do that one shot. So yeah, and I thought he did a good. I mean, I don't know. I really wish I could have defended that more to you guys, because I thought they did such a good job. One of the things maybe I can end with this and we can move on, is that we have to shut down pretty soon. But one of the things that's interesting about knights in medieval literature is one of the reasons it's presumed that the stories of King Arthur and the Round Table was written was actually to give these rambunctious men. And remember, this is still kind of a power vacuum world after the fall of Rome, and you have all these different factions, different cultures, towns, cities, whatever, empires starting to grow, and you have a whole league of what are called second sons. So these are men who don't have responsibility to their estate. But they still have money. So these are, and they were brutal. So these are not the kind of knights you see in, A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger, like kind of cute, pleasant guys. Like they come in your town, they're taking your woman in the barn, they're doing whatever they want, right? And so the stories of knights were, in a sense, told for them to give them an ideal to strive for. And that was part, like, to be a good person. And that's what I thought was really interesting about this, is because that's part of what the Brotherhood is trying to do. Now, what are they really after is the question, right? That's what Maximus has to discover. But for him, it is a kind of, he wants just to murder everybody who messed with him, right? He wants pure revenge, which I don't think revenge generally is thought of as a good thing in a moral sense, right? Is not in literature, like Count of Monte Cristo, like it tends to corrupt you. But he's going to the Brotherhood to be, forged into something capable of doing good in the world. And that dichotomy, I think, is really interesting in this show. Anyway, so I'll just end with that.
I will say that Maximus became more interesting to me when he was teamed up with Lucy.
Well, yeah, that's the point.
I do see,
and it's love. Love pacifies the night, right?
I do see how he was courageous in fighting the bear, right? He had no other option for it. But he wasn't as in none of the scenes when he wasn't with Lucy were as interesting to me as they were when he was with Lucy. And that was when I saw...
We men need you ladies to make us better. That's just the way it is. That's what he's saying. That's it.
He's also courageous when they fought those two vampiric characters on the bridge.
Yeah, and the ghoul. He goes in and fights the ghoul. Right? He says no to the ghoul, and he doesn't know how to operate that thing, and ghouls are dangerous. And that is the most dangerous. He just saw that ghoul slaughter like 20 people. And he goes after.
I mean, one character that, look, the thing that he and what's her face?
Lucy?
He and Lucy share. I think they are both brave.
Yeah.
I think they both have convictions, and they both try to follow through with them. So.
He gets shot. He's like, oh, it happens all the time. like it is
he's shot with a rotten tooth.
With a rotten tooth, yeah. I mean, it's such a weird world.
His entire body into sepsis. I mean,
yeah.
He's a guy.
Yeah, I think we underestimate the toughness of these. Anybody who could survive in that world for more than a few minutes has to have some toughness in it. It's just not possible.
Yeah, you just think back to the days, as we were talking about, in the early 19th century or even 18th century. Those people were rugged, man. Medieval times, those people were so rugged.
Oh yeah,
we couldn't even relate to half of the miseries that they had to contend with on a daily basis.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's Fallout. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you next time. Like I said, we're going to take a little bit of a hiatus, and I think we'll be back in hopefully July, right? We're back in July. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.